Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the council briefing of the 18th of July 2023. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, paying our respects to elders past and present, and the City of Vincent is proud to support the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We do have an apology this evening from Councillor Ross Iopolo, but all other council members are here in person. So we'll go straight to public question time and receiving of public statements. Welcome members of the public gallery this evening. For those of you who may not have been to a council meeting, if you wish to say some words, you're very welcome to. We just ask that you state your name, the item that you're speaking to, and we do time to 3 minutes. There's no set order, just whoever would like to approach first. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Lewis Sugar. I'm an associate at Element representing East Metropolitan Health Service. I'm here to express my support for item 5.9, which relates to the outcomes of advertising for Amendment 11 to the City's Local Planning Scheme number 2. Specifically, this amendment addresses the emergency flight paths associated with Royal Perth Hospital. In collaboration with East Metropolitan Health Services, Element has actively engaged key stakeholders over the past few years to determine the most suitable flight path routes for emergency helicopter operations at Royal Perth Hospital and the State Medical Trauma Unit. The objective of this amendment is to safeguard one of 2 critical flight paths. This will ensure that the proposed developments do not encroach upon or pose hazards within these routes, thereby maintaining unimpeded helicopter access to Royal Perth Hospital. These routes are designed to support helicopter flights in the event of an engine failure, where they have only one functioning engine and reduced flight performance. The 2 routes have been considered in detail, taking into account the following factors: adherence to all relevant aviation standards, minimising impact to land parcels by utilising major road and rail reservations, and the Swan River. Alignment with the existing planning framework to minimise the impact on development potential and strategically important land areas for the state, the City of Vincent, Perth and Development WA. And it's worth noting that since the initiation of the scheme amendment in June 2022, the City has explored the future redevelopment options within the North Claysbrook Road area, which includes those 2 batching plant sites. Upon reviewing the City's draft North Claysbrook planning framework, the flight paths proposed for protection under this scheme amendment will not hinder the achievement of significant redevelopment opportunities of up to 16 stories within that precinct. Without the protection provided by this amendment, ongoing development within the city could compromise the operational safety of emergency helicopter flights. Such a scenario could potentially lead to the decommissioning of the helipad at Royal Perth Hospital, thereby affecting critical treatment of patients at the State Medical Trauma Unit. Thank you for your time, and your support for amendment number 11 is respectfully requested. Thank you.
Thanks, Lewis. Before you go, I did have a question because we do have an area there, R160. So in terms of development potential, what's the maximum that an R160 site could go to if it's in this area?
I think it's the draft framework at the moment. You have R160 in your scheme at the moment, and your director could probably talk to this more so, but the draft planning framework is there to augment that and allow for up to 16 stories, which is potentially much greater than R160 at the moment because plot ratio is a factor. So 16-storey development height is higher than the R160 you have at the moment for those batching plant sites.
Thank you very much, Lewis. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Peter Holtz and I live at 12 Orange Avenue, Perth, and I've been the coordinator in developing the street character application for Orange Avenue and Hope Street. I don't know the agenda item, I apologise.
That's okay.
This is an L-shaped neighbourhood is unique inner city example of the original semi-detached workers' houses, where both sides of the street are lined with predominantly double-fronted terraces dating back to the early 1900s. The nomination process was submitted in April 2022. Of the 18 known owner-occupied houses, 16 supported the commencing the process. 1 was undecided and another decided not to comment. There was a thorough consultation process. Prior to the public meeting organised by the City of Vincent for the 10th of October, 2022, the residents were invited to a meeting on Saturday, the 1st of October, to discuss the process and potential guidelines. Copies of the relevant material were provided to the residents prior to the meeting. The public were informed of the meeting prior of 10th of October by the City of Vincent through their normal channels, including letters going to the landowners, and I also emailed the residents. The meeting outlined how the process would work, what is meant by character retention, and the required steps to develop the guidelines. The meeting resolved to form a working group to progress the development of these guidelines. 2 working group meetings were held at the City of Vincent in November 2022 and April 2023. The working group had additional meetings and communicated regularly through email. The residents were then emailed a penultimate version of the guidelines and were invited to a meeting on the 13th of May 2023 to comment and propose modifications. Modifications were made, and the reasons for the modifications were emailed to the residents. The final version of the guidelines was re-advertised to reflect our feedback with less prescriptive deemed to comply criteria, and now included key concepts of sympathetic design and supporting diagrams. When compared to the guidelines originally advertised for comment, the criteria removed included street walls and fences and associated local housing objectives, roof pitch and street facing window provisions, and materiality of the new development. In their place were 4 key guidelines pertaining to building height, street setback, setback of garages and carports, and the streetscape. A further 2 emails were sent to residents encouraging them to comment on the guidelines through the City of Vincent website. In all, 16 residents were on our emailing list, and we had 11 submissions supporting the guidelines and 1 objection. It should be noted that the objection was during the initial advertising period and prior to the final guidelines being advertised. While it has been a lengthy process, it has been very thorough and has been rewarding to produce these guidelines, which are practical, but will also assist character retention of Orange Avenue and Hope Street. We believe the guidelines still allow residents to develop their properties while preserving the unique character of Orange and Hope precinct. I'd also like to acknowledge the City of Vincent staff, the initial work of Cameron Hartley, and the ongoing support and professionalism of Michael Flanagan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for your advocacy on this one. Some
Yes.
of those things that you've talked through in terms of having working group meetings, I think are things that we could potentially bring to other character retention applications.
Yeah.
But it's been a very positive process, and thank you very much for being part of it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name's Nick Grindrod, and I'm here to speak in support of item 5.2 on the agenda, being the officer's recommendation for approval of 6 townhouses at 33 Smith Street, Highgate. I'm an owner and occupier at 324 Sterling Street, Highgate, which is the complex directly behind 33 Sterling Street, and I also happen to be a town planner. I'm not speaking tonight on behalf of the applicant. I'm here of my own volition. There's not much for me to say about this development in terms of town planning, as the officer's report does a good job justifying why this proposal should be approved. The long planning, heritage and design review process that this proposal has been through has resulted in quite a good design outcome given the constraints posed by the dimensions of the lot. I would, however, like to request that the council amends condition 10 to explicitly require the applicant to also undertake dilapidation surveys of all townhouses at 324 Sterling Street, given the complex directly adjoins the development site and the rear townhouse is about 1 to 2 metres from the shared property boundary. Again, I'd like to urge the council to approve this development application at the meeting next week, subject to one very minor amendment to condition 10 as previously described. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. Appreciate you coming in. Are there any further speakers? Okay, thank you very much. We did receive a written statement, but that was from Peter. So thank you very much, Peter, for that. And there were no further written statements received this evening. Okay, so we'll then go to declarations of interest. Theo, any received this evening?
Through Mayor Cole, one declaration of interest from Councillor Gondaszewski in relation to item 6.1, which is the bike plan, a proximity interest, noting that one of the proposed bike lanes is in proximity to Councillor Gondaszewski's residential property. Excluding that bit of the proposal, I don't think there's any issue with Councillor Gondaszewski participating in the debate on the rest, but that could be dealt with next week potentially, or
Councillor Gontaszewski, would you like us to somehow separate that out for the decision making?
No, I'm not seeking to participate.
Okay, thank you.
And the second declaration of interest was councillor Warner, noting in relation to the item 5.9, the presentation just heard on the Royal Perth Hospital emergency flight path, noting that the consultant Element is a supporter of the Revelation Film Festival, which councillor Warner is the general manager, and noting that that support is via a board member who offers support in grant applications, but not financial support. That's all, Mayor Cole.
Thank you. Councillors, any last minute declarations? Councillor Hallett?
One from me then for the bike network plan as well.
To clarify, is that one of the proposals touches closely to, as a proximity interest in relation to one of the proposals?
I'll have to look it up, but it's the Stirling Street.
Okay, we can check that and clarify that for next week's OCM.
Thank you, councillors. Any others? All right, thank you very much. So for members of the public gallery, this is the briefing, and the decision making happens at next Tuesday night's meeting, where you'll hear councillors deliberate and see voting and decision making happening. But for tonight, it's an opportunity for council members to ask questions and seek further information from administration. We do go to the items that have been raised by members of the public gallery first. So the first item that was raised this evening was 5.9, outcome of advertising Amendment 11 to Local Planning Scheme Number 2, Royal Perth Hospital Emergency Flight Path. Councillors, any questions on this item? I do have a question, Director, just in relation to the R160 zoning. Given the proximity to the Graham Farmer Freeway, and we've looked at Leederville in proximity to freeway going into the RA type zonings, is there any risk that this will inhibit development, given that that's the highest zoning in the Claysbrook area into the future?
To you, Mayor Cole, so as was mentioned, 16 stories is probably the limit that would be possible if this scheme amendment was adopted for that site. I mean, that's quite significant compared to what is currently permitted on the site. But it's an open question about whether additional height over and above 16 stories could be entertained in the future by council. So I think it's a valid consideration, yes.
I just wondered then, because this is our highest zone area in Claysbrook, is there any reason why it had to come over this particular area, or could it have potentially swept across lower zoned areas that were at least less risk of seeing an increase in zoning over time?
Yes, to you, Mayor Cole, I guess there was two balancing factors really. One was the noise impact and the amenity impact that the flight path would have on those lower coded residential areas, combined with the development impact. So Element and everyone involved has tried to balance all of that and find the best path that minimises the impact on development, both in the City of Perth and in the City of Vincent, as well as minimising the amenity impact on residents. So it's been a balancing act. This is the path that has been landed on, and it's really, trying to work out whether that's the best outcome.
I'm just also wondering then, if there is new development there, would that require additional sound attenuation strategies for the development that would potentially cost more to develop?
No, there wouldn't likely be any requirement, because the frequency of that flight path is so low. It's unlikely there'd be any requirement for noise attenuation as a result for the redevelopment of that part of Claysbrook. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think through a scenario where we are still trying to incentivise the concrete batching plants to relocate. We have since had our Leederville draft precinct plan, where we have gone to heights as far as high as R23, where they are freeway facing, and whether we could potentially just be in a situation where the ability to incentivize or to allow further development opportunity is potentially impacted into the future. And if that did happen, what scenarios could arise? Could it mean that you could renegotiate a flight path, et cetera, once this is locked in? What capacity does the city have to revisit zoning in this high density area?
Yeah, to you, Mayor Cole. I mean, that's certainly something we can have a discussion with the applicant about between now and next week and provide some information, the briefing notes on that issue. But just commenting on the viability and the incentive, the incentive that exists with the 7-story height, the incentive that currently exists as the limit on the sites. The incentive probably isn't there at the moment. I would expect that 16 stories would provide that incentive. So I think within the current range, the incentive would exist, and adding the extra whatever it is, it's probably not going to make that big a difference. 16 stories would be more than viable and would provide an incentive for the land use on those sites to change if the height was to change, because at the moment it's still 7 stories.
And given that we're currently advertising the Claysbrook planning framework and that we sort of opened it up for comment, could there be, a bit of a provision of information where we've received any community feedback on height? So if there's been any feedback about this particular zoning and the heights in this area, whether there's been any request to consider additional as part of the advertising of that framework?
Yes, to you, Mayor Cole. Tara can provide a better answer than me, I think.
To you, Mayor Cole, there has been comments around the fact that this site particular is the right place for the most height in the area. There hasn't been comments around the fact that what that number is, but it has definitely been recognised that these sites are the place for our key development sites in North Claysbrook.
Okay, I guess it would be useful then to just get some analysis from you both around why this site is R160 and why we wouldn't consider similar to that which we've proposed and adopted in Leederville. How are they different? Why would this be a lower height? Is 16 as a limit the right amount without having any prohibiting factors over that? Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move to the next item which was raised, and that was 5.8, outcomes of advertising for character area guidelines. Questions on this item? Councillor Hallett?
Just in relation to our discussion the other week about the medium density codes, that was only referred to briefly in this report in, I think it was admin response to a consultation comment, and just wondering whether there's any need to finish the review of the character retention stuff that I think we were going to do in response to the code before we go ahead with this.
Through you, Mayor Cole, no, I wouldn't say that there's a need to finish that review before we go ahead with this. This is really the main, I suppose, intention of this report is to add additional areas to our character areas. If they are approved by council, then any review of character areas as a whole, they would be included in that review. So I don't see a reason to delay this due to the medium density codes.
Councillors, any questions? Okay, thank you. The third item that was raised was number 33 Smith Street Highgate, proposed 6 group dwellings. Councillor Loden.
First one was just the query raised from the gallery around the dilapidation report. Just getting a response from administration on if that's inappropriate to include and would they consider including it?
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, the administration will update condition 10, which requires dilapidation reports to be prepared for surrounding properties. In that condition that's currently been drafted, it refers to the properties either side of the subject site, but we will refer to the property to the rear as well. And that's consistent with the construction management plans policy of council. So we can update that following briefing.
Thank you. My other question is a tree related question, which I'm sure you'll be excited to hear. I'm aware we've already got sufficient trees in the verge directly in front of the property, but given the setback discretion required, is there an opportunity to place one in the neighbouring verge as well, on the church side, which I'm not sure if that's the north or the south, which then helps to block the bulk and scale of that development there?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that would be to the south of the subject site. Administration had contemplated a verge tree in front of this property, the subject site, but not in front of the church. So we can explore that as part of briefing notes.
And I mean, obviously, I'll take the feedback through the briefing, but what I'd be seeking is an amendment to include an additional tree on that verge on the basis of addressing the bulk and scale and the front setback discretion.
Sure.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. If you could just, through you, Mayor Cole, I'd just be grateful for some clarification into the calculation on the landscaping of the canopy cover and the landscaping. I would think I recall that there's segments of the landscape plan provided that haven't been included in the overall calculation. I'm just asking this in response to some commentary in the consultation around the viability of the site. I think it's on the northern side of the development and its dimensions supporting viable tree planting in that space.
Through you, Mayor Cole, administration's assessment is specific to deep soil planting area, so a minimum dimension of 1 metre, and I suppose that's what we've assessed it based on to provide for more substantial tree planting. But it is acknowledged that there will be some portions of the site, particularly where it's located underneath the upper floor overhangs, for example, where it wouldn't be able to sustain large tree planting in time or mature tree planting in time. So I suppose the landscaping plan reflects that in terms of proposing lower lying plants in those areas. But as far as the deep soil planting calculations, my understanding is that is accurate.
Thank you. And just also on the materials and finishes, so there will be a schedule of materials and finishes that will be required to be provided. I'm just trying to get to, but if you just on the plans, just if you could confirm if the cladding has been changed from the initial monument or whether that's still part of the plan.
Through you, Mayor Cole, it is still part of the plans. It is shown as a darker colour, being monument, though it doesn't specify, it just refers to it as being metal cladding, doesn't specify monument. But I suppose from an architectural sense, the intention was to provide that darker colour in terms of that cladding, and that wasn't opposed by the city's DRP member. I think it's just more around making sure that it's confirmed in terms of the colours and the specific finish.
Okay, and just I guess I'd be grateful on sort of thoughts in relation to the dark cladding in terms of the contrast with the heritage building to the south. I think in the report it talks about the dark cladding from the perspective of the environmental, the overall environmental impact of the development. I guess I just have some concerns in relation to the interface on the basis of that colour and materiality with the development to the south, but it's probably, I'd be grateful for some commentary on that in the briefing notes. It's fine.
Sure. Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, we can provide specific comments around the appropriateness of the colour materiality as adjacent to the church.
Thank you. That's all.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Manager. I assume you're here for 5.1, Ellen. Okay, we'll go to that next. So item 5.1 is number 26 Moya Street, Perth, proposed alterations and additions to a single house. This is an amendment to an approved development. Any questions? No questions. Okay, councillors, we do have our legal representative, Simon Moen from Jackson McDonald here. I'm not sure if you're on billable hours, Simon, but we might have to bring you in at this stage. So I was just thinking, we've actually got 3 items tonight that have got confidential attachments. So what I might do is just go to each of those items to see whether you have any questions on matters that are in the public reports. And then if you don't, or if you do, that's fine. And then after that, we'll then go into confidential session so that there can be questions in relation to 5.10 first, which is the redevelopment proposals for Leederville. We also do have confidential attachments in relation to the Beatty Park Leisure Centre outdoor pool tender, and we have confidential attachments in relation to reports to the audit committee meeting. Does that sound like a okay way to proceed? Okay, so first of all, do council members have any questions in relation to the open report on item 5.10, the proposed major land transaction in Leederville? Okay, thank you. Any questions in relation to 6.4, the request for tender IE 259 of 2023 Beatty Park Leisure Centre 12 and 30 metre tile renewal? Okay, and in relation to 8.2, report and minutes of the audit committee meeting held on the 29th of June 2023. Okay, oh yes.
Yep.
Can I just say, just in relation to the public report, but not the attachments that are confidential?
I just thought it'd be useful for the council to work its way through that Paxton report. That was all.
Yeah, that's the
Because,
confidential item.
Yeah. So we'll do that later. Is
That
that
will
it?
be in confidential session.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cheers. Sorry.
thank you. Yep, okay, well then we will just have to briefly halt the live stream for the moment while we deal with those confidential attachments, and we will be back as soon as